Ball. Welcome back to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly. Members preparing to continue debate on the stem cell research and therapy bill. The member for Angiston, the Minister of Transport and Aviation, the Honourable Glenys Hannah Martin, is expected to begin her presentation. The bill moved this morning by the member for North Andros in the Berry Islands, Dr. Perry Gomez. He's the Minister of Health. And seconded by the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office. He's Minister responsible for investments, actually, the Pinewood MP, Kaylis Roll. He says this has the potential to define us in the evolution of medicine, that is stem cell research and therapy. Also, he says there's some activity going on already at the College of the Bahamas. We'll find out some more about that after this bill has been passed. Of course, also presenting this morning was the Leader of the Opposition, the Kalani Member of Parliament, Dr. Hubert Minnis. He says, you know, we can't police traffic lights and tickets, and, you know, this is not the time to do this because we're not in a position to police or provide the kind of oversight that is necessary. Again, members of the government saying this is a prime opportunity for the Bahamas. In fact, the member for Marco City, Greg Moss, speaking, saying that it is akin to the captive insurance market that we had an opportunity to capitalize on in the 60s and 70s, and because we were timid for some reason or other, we backed off, and the Caymans and Bermuda benefiting beautifully from the captive insurance market. He says it's something that we ought to take advantage of. But let's listen to the Member of Parliament for Pinewood, Kaylis Roll. He actually seconded the motion this morning.
It will record it as pioneering, and it will record it as transformative for the future of our country. Mr. Speaker, the member for North Andros and the Berry Islands, as the mover of this bill, broke ground for the evolution of medicine in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, he broke ground for the diversification and expansion of our economy. Make no mistake about it, Mr. Speaker, this is a tremendous opportunity for the Bahamas. Based on what I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, about my constituent who is suffering from an ailment, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the member also broke ground for the enhancement of the quality of life for individuals suffering from ailments which can be easily treated with minimally invasive procedures. I believe that all manner of positive opportunities are associated with stem cell therapy. And, Mr. Speaker, one can argue the pros and cons of stem cell research and treatment to infinity. No matter where you stand on the argument, the question has to be asked, Mr. Speaker, what is the controversy all about? Stem cells can be contrasted with differentiated cells, Mr. Speaker, and that is they have not been defined as yet, and they can morph into whatever you want them or need them to be. They offer much hope for medical advancement because of their ability to grow into almost any kind of cell. And as an example, neural cells in the brain and spinal cord that have been damaged can be replaced by stem cells, Mr. Speaker. And in the treatment of cancer, cells destroyed by radiation or chemotherapy can be replaced with new healthy stem cells that adapt to the affected area. Whether it be a part of the brain, the heart, liver, lungs, or wherever. Dead cells of almost any kind, no matter the type of injury or disease, can be replaced with new healthy cells, thanks to the amazing flexibility of stem cells. And because of this, Mr. Speaker, billions of dollars are being poured into this field globally. Mr. Speaker, this bill is very personal to me, as a very close family member of mine was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to digest, Mr. Speaker, and deal with as a family. And given what I just said a few minutes ago, it gives me a sense of optimism, not only for my family, but for every Bahamian family whom have been touched by illnesses which are treatable by minimally invasive methods available through stem cell. Mr. Speaker, every great opportunity has as its companion risk. And the key to managing the great risks is first to understand what those risks are and build the infrastructure to mitigate them. And I believe that in what we're doing today, in what we've done to this point, Mr. Speaker, by bringing this legislation and all of the research that went into it, we are putting the infrastructure in place to mitigate that risk. The process thus far has been very involved, and Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that it has been very involved because I had to bring the first proposal to Cabinet for approval. And the Prime Minister, in his infinite wisdom, understood that the government could not approve a project for something that is as important as stem cell treatment and research in the Bahamas without understanding exactly what we're up against or what we face, what the benefits are, what the downside risk may be. Mr. Speaker, when we came to office, we met a company who was substantially completed with the construction of a facility designed to offer stem cell treatment. That company operates, is proposing to operate in Grand Bahama. And we had many meetings with them, Mr. Speaker, because they couldn't understand why a letter of approval was not forthcoming. And I can tell you, I got calls morning, noon, night, emails. I got calls from not only the principals of the company, but everyone that would say that they know me or they know the Prime Minister was asked to call on their behalf. And, Mr. Speaker, the government had to wade through all of the information and make a decision which made sense. And as a businessman, Mr. Speaker, I understand the cost of investing. I understand the pitfalls. I understand the cost of capital sitting there doing nothing. I think at that point, the company had invested about $6 million in the process thus far. And I was a bit impatient because I looked at their proposal and it appeared as if they had gone through the right process. They had approval from the medical council, if I'm not mistaken, member from North Andros and Berry Islands. And they had noted scientists and practitioners from the U.S. involved in the company. And for me, I thought it was reasonable justification. And, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister said that he wanted to ensure that we are protecting Bahamians, I didn't fully understand immediately, but as we went through the process, I understood exactly what he was talking about. And, Mr. Speaker, when we completed the process that got us here, I sat down in his office one evening and I said to him, thank you for the lesson in process. Because we could have approved that investment. And in fact, some level of approval was already given. They didn't have a business license to import their equipment and to begin the actual treatment. But, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the risk now, not having regulations in place, not knowing exactly what it is they were doing, and I'm not a scientist, I go and I do my research and I read, and the information seemed reasonable. I think it was adipose stem cell therapy is what they were proposing to do. Something. And adipose is taking the fat from one's body and using that.
That's going to be very popular. Tourism will benefit from that.
But Mr. Speaker, no infrastructure existed, no coordinated infrastructure existed. The skill level, the professional skill level exists, some locally and some offshore. And going through the process, what we were able to do was to coordinate with all of the relevant bodies. We did our research. We consulted with many of the associations. We consulted with the Christian Council, Medical Council, and the member from North Andros and the Berry Islands listed the others, to get an idea of what we needed to do. A committee was appointed to advise the government on a framework for regulation and the operation of stem cell facilities. They reported, in addition to that, a committee was established, an ethics committee made up of locals as well as foreign professionals. And the bill outlines what the requirement to serve on that committee is. Mr. Speaker, countries like Russia, China, and many European countries are well on their way in the treatment aspect of stem cells. And although, Mr. Speaker, the United States commits significant sums of monies to research, they're still lagging behind in the approval for the actual practice of stem cell procedures. And if you look at all of the public commentary on stem cell research, there is only, and therapy, there is only one controversial aspect that continues to exist in what I've seen, what I've heard, and that's embryonic stem cell research. A lot of the investment in research in the U.S. has been confined to embryonic stem cell research. And the world has recognized the opportunity. China has. In fact, in one publication, it was suggested that China performs more than 2 million procedures annually of stem cell therapy. When you look at the acceptance of it, Mr. Speaker, and I'm a big football fan. The member from West End and Bimini and I always argue about who is the best team in the league. I used to be a Dolphins fan. In fact, Mr. Speaker, at the end of every season, I turn in my Dolphin card, and at the beginning, I take it back up, and midway through, I give up. Yeah. Well, I doubt they're going to have a winning season next year anyway. But Mr. Speaker, Peyton Manning had an injury that was determined to be almost career-ending. Career-ending, Mr. Speaker. It's not often a professional athlete has a career-ending injury and he comes back, performs well. Despite where you may exist on the discussion and the effectiveness of stem cell therapy, Peyton Manning went and he took the treatment, came back, and like the member from Surrey Luther said, took a failing team, a failing football team, to the conference championship. Thanks to the treatment that is available in stem cell and Europe. So, Mr. Speaker, there is clear indication that the treatment is effective. Most of the information you would find out there would suggest that it is. In fact, I was reading something, Mr. Speaker, that suggested if you speak negatively about stem cell treatment as a practitioner, you're classified as, and this was a scientist who wrote an article criticizing stem cell tourism, and he was accused of being a nutball Canadian socialist bioethicist. He was accused of being a nutball Canadian socialist bioethicist. And it goes to show the general support for the treatment. Mr. Speaker, take a minute or two to go through some of the features of the bill. And my colleague the member from North Andros and the Berry Islands went into some details, but just for the sake of reinforcement, Mr. Speaker, and also to demonstrate the fact that we went through a painstaking process to ensure that the infrastructure is in place to manage, monitor, and get the most benefit out of this evolving industry. The purpose of this act, Mr. Speaker, is to create a legal framework for stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas to ensure that stem cell research and therapy is conducted safely and ethically, having regard to emerging scientific developments, and to foster innovation in stem cell research and therapy with the goal of encouraging the advancement of medical cures and regenerative medicine. Mr. Speaker, what isn't clearly mentioned here is the economic benefits of this act. And when I look at the amount of proposals that are in the Office of the Prime Minister and the Bahamas Investment Authority, one can only call it the modern-day gold rush if you look at it from that perspective. Everybody sees the opportunity. everybody sees the opportunity. Everybody understands that the first mover in this industry in the Bahamas will create lots of opportunities, I think is the best way to put it. It will create opportunities not only for the investors, Mr. Speaker, but it will create opportunities for the service providers, the individuals that will be participating in this as practitioners. There are opportunities for knowledge transfer, knowledge development. The member from North Andros and the Berry Islands mentioned earlier that there is significant activities going on at the College of the Bahamas involving stem cell research on a global level. That will be highlighted. That will come to the fore after this bill is approved and we give birth to a new industry. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the benefits to tourism. You know, God blessed us with many, many things. Anybody that says that the Bahamas is not a blessed country don't understand where we are and what we have. We are right off the coast of the United States of America. I mentioned some statistics earlier, Mr. Speaker, about the amount of procedures that take place in China, but in Europe, Mr. Speaker, in Russia, many of those patients are Americans. Can you imagine not having to fly 10 hours and be cooped up in an environment that are not favorable to recovery and not being able to speak the language? Mr. Speaker, we have all of the components that will make the Bahamas the center of activity for stem cell treatment. Mr. Speaker, the other component of the legislation that I think is very important is the establishment of the National Stem Cell Ethics Committee. The names that were called as we were going through the development of this represents the creme de la creme, Mr. Speaker, in medicine this side of the world. I believe this hemisphere, if you want to say that. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the protective mechanisms that are being put in place by establishing, one, this committee, and two, the members that are being appointed to this committee will provide us with all of the assurances, or many of the assurances, that we will need to ensure that this industry gives us what we anticipate will be great results. Mr. Speaker, I won't go into the regulation. My colleague from the member from North Andros and the Berry Islands spoke in detail about the regulations. But Mr. Speaker, I believe that what we're doing now on this day in this Parliament will define the Bahamas in terms of the evolution of medicine, in terms of the economy. This is an opportunity for us to, if we manage it properly, Mr. Speaker, we continue to talk about the diversification of the economy. And the diversification of the economy doesn't necessarily mean going into something that is completely new to us. It means looking at something that we're currently doing. The Bahamas does medicine well, and this is a part of medicine that we are made for. Geographically, the quality of facilities that we have, the openness and transparency of our entire system, the Bahamas is positioned Mr. Speaker, to take advantage of all of the opportunities available under this new regime. Mr. Speaker, Pinewood supports this bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start, I want to point out the dilemma that we here in the opposition face and has continuously faced since we became opposition. Mr. Speaker, an invitation to the 40th Independence event, which was typed on the 26th of June, the deadline being to send in all acceptance and individuals whom you are placing on your invited list to attend, the deadline being Monday, the 1st of July. The stamp on the letter sent by the Secretary concerning our invitation, Mr. Speaker, is also on the 1st of July on the deadline. And we received these invitations, Mr. Speaker, after the deadline has expired, which was yesterday. Mr. Speaker, an urgent stamp on it. Mr. Speaker, as opposition leader, I had not received...
Well, that was the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office, the Office of the Prime Minister, the Minister responsible for investments, Kayla's role, presenting earlier today in this morning's session, actually. And as I told you, Minister Roll talking about the fact that this will be a momentous time in the history of the Bahamas with respect to the evolution of medicine, and that some things are happening at the College of the Bahamas already with respect to stem cell research and therapy, and we will find out a lot more about that after this bill is passed. And again, we're not quite certain what the plans are, but we think that the government intends to get done with this particular debate today. Also speaking earlier, the member for Marco City, Greg Moss, talking about the fact that this is another prime opportunity that is staring the Bahamas in the face. And he referenced the, again, captive insurance market that we flirted with in the 60s and 70s, and for some reason just let it get away. And there are other countries in the region who are benefiting handsomely from dealing with those markets and in that industry. Of course, the bill was moved by the member for North Andros and the Berry Islands, Minister of Health, Dr. Perry Gomez, who talked about the importance of stem cell research and therapy and how the Bahamas ought to take advantage of what is there sitting before us. And again, as we go back and talk about who else presented this morning, the member for South Abaco, in a twist, really, not the usual research, stem cell research that we imagine. The member for South Abaco was talking about what he did with an avocado plant and said that, in effect, was part of stem cell research as well. And it certainly could be a teaching tool and something that Bahamians can learn from in the future. And we know, of course, the member for South Abaco's interest and love for agriculture, and he used the opportunity to speak to that. Let's get some more of the presentations from the members of the House of Assembly.
Expired, which was yesterday. Mr. Speaker, an urgent stamp on it. Mr. Speaker, as opposition leader, I had not received one. My colleagues received, but late, beyond the deadline. And coming to my box at F&M headquarters was the invitation for the Honorable Obadiah Wilstrom. So I can only assume that my invitation would have gone to Obadiah Wilstrom. But Mr. Speaker, in either event, the invitations have been received beyond the deadline. And I want the public to know that when the opposition does not show up to many events, it's not because we don't want to, but because we are never invited, or sometimes we are invited after the event. And I want them to be very cognizant of that, Mr. Speaker. So we have not sent in any names to participate in any of the independence events because we did not receive any invitation. We just received it beyond the deadline.
The member yields. The chair recognizes honourable member for Bain and Grandstown.
That is not a new disease. That is a chronic disease. It used to happen when we used to sit over there. Mrs. Speaker. And they were over there. So that is not new. We all know. Mr. Speaker, I got my invitations just like them on Monday. But I know from having been in opposition so long, I know that you just send me your list anyway, and you'll get the invitation, Mrs. Speaker. So
I got my own.
Members, the chair wants to hear Bain and Grandstown.
So this is not to excuse it, but just to say that it happens with all the administrations, and you know, these things are usually sent out by office personnel, and there's no decision on the part of the government to send. It doesn't make sense to send these things there. So no, you don't want me to sit down. See, this member, I have to let him. See, he came in here as a minister. He came to Parliament as a minister. He didn't go through the ropes. So, ask you do. You do. You all came as a minister, so you all used to that special treatment. You see, but people like Central Grand Bahama and I, we came in as lowly fellows and we worked our way up. We worked our way up. And so we understand. But it's not personal. But I apologize on behalf of the government for the late receipt of the invitations, and I ask you to not consider that, but rather enable your constituents to you know. No, this is I can get on my knees. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes honourable member for
Thank
Kalani.
you for the explanation, but the fact speaks for itself. And while I'm on my feet, I want to send a message to all F&M supporters that they know that we've received the invitations late, and therefore, according to the member for Bain and Grandstown, they can call in at our headquarters and their names can be added to the list. And I hope that they would meet their seat. Their seats would be available when they arrive. Mr. Speaker, before I spoke, I asked the floor that I wanted to relay a message first, and the clock has started. Could we start back at 30? Could we restart the clock? I have not started yet.
Member for Kalani, just continue your presentation. All members in the presentation have used the opportunity to speak to constituents, and so
Speaker,
it's consistent.
I rise to make my contribution on the stem cell research and therapy bill that was tabled here in this honorable house. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I state that I am a trained medical doctor. I am by general disposition a scientific and results-driven individual. I have always harbored a fierce commitment and focus on improving the health care in the Bahamas at large. Naturally, I am a supporter of medical research and development. Without it, we would still be practicing medieval medicine treating hemorrhoids, as an example, with hot irons, advising pregnant women to prepare for their deaths at childbirth, and treating just about every ailment possible with bloodletting, leeches. So I am not automatically opposed to the idea of stem cell research and therapies, Mr. Speaker. In developed countries like the United States of America and Canada, but also in the Middle East and in Thailand, following years of discussion and debate, including moral and ethical issues connected to stem cell research. Some levels of stem cell research and therapy have been authorized and even supported by the respective governments. Mr. Speaker, for many sound reasons, I do not believe that the Bahamas ought to be involved in stem cell research at this time. The Bahamas has yet to receive an ideal primary health care services for its citizens, where they live, whether in New Providence, Grand Bahama, or other family islands. We have only recently updated emergency and operating theaters in Grand Bahama. The critical care unit at Princess Margaret Hospital is still under construction. We have no information that the facility will be adequately staffed following the discontinuation of the employed persons trained under the 52-week program who would have been utilized for staffing, and paucity of money in the budget for training for specialist nurses and technicians. We have only now begun to build small hospitals in Exuma and Abaco. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that plans left in place by the last F&M government to expand the number of small hospitals to other populous islands, Eleuthera, Long Island, and Andros, for example, will not be shelved. Our advance towards full national health insurance is stuck somewhere in a working committee, commerce, or commission of this government. And the member for Centerville recently told the press that the lack of progress of National Health Act was my fault. I must be a powerful man. It's my fault. I wish to remind the honorable members that when the member for Centerville last led the government between 2002 and 2007, he saw to it that the National Health Act was enacted in the closing months of his term. The F&M government won the election in 2007. We did not bring the National Insurance Act into force because the healthcare system of the country was not in a condition to support a true national health program. But we did nothing to the bill. The bill still sits, but we did not bring it. Separately, we put in place National Prescription Drug Plan. In 2012 general election campaign, the members opposite assured the Bahamian people that the National Insurance Act would be brought into effect within the first year of them coming to office. They won the election, Mr. Speaker, and now 14 months after coming to office, they have failed to do anything to bring the act into effect. In fact, it still sits. Instead, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health has advised that the program is being reviewed by a committee, and still, it is my fault. Always my or my team's fault. Please, Mr. Speaker, please. When will this government accept responsibility for being government? They are the government, and they must govern. They must govern. Well, since they're blaming me, will I be blamed for the fiasco at the UNESCO opening? when Bahamian participation was not there? Am I to be blamed for that? Am I to be blamed, Mr. Speaker, for the fiasco with the Prime Minister and his entourage traveling to Florida to catch a boat from Florida to Bimini, and the boat was not prepared, did not meet Coast Guard safety standards? Am I to be blamed for that? Am I to be blamed for the ambassadorship that they're trying to establish for Elliston Reming that has not yet been approved? Am I to be blamed for that, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and the government has set us in an embarrassing situation. We were embarrassed to the world with the Bimini fiasco, the shipping fiasco. One must ask the question.
That was
After they did not.
Dr. Hubert, Minister, Leader of the Opposition, at the end there presenting. Earlier we heard from the Pinewood Member of Parliament, Kalis Roll. He's the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office with responsibility for investments. The member for Angleton is scheduled to present, so let's join them in the House as they prepare to start this afternoon's session.
When we suspended our proceedings, we were in the process of debating a bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected purposes. It is the Chair's understanding that before we continue, there's an intervention. Very well. So we will continue as per our order of business, and the member for Angleton had the floor. The member for Angleton, if you're ready. The member is. The Chair recognizes honourable member for Angleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I will not be long because I know that there is much business to be done in this honourable House. I just want to say one or two words, particularly after hearing the member for Kalani and some of the hints that came from the other side. And I want to get to my feet, Mr. Speaker, to declare that we are not ugly, we are not dumb, we are not hopeless, we are not lawless, we are not whatless, nor are we incapable. Mr. Speaker, I rebuke, as a proud Bahamian woman and mother and citizen, any negative psychic message which surreptitiously or even sometimes cleverly are implanted in our psyche as a people. I especially rebuke, Mr. Speaker, this retarding energy when it is within earshot of our young people. Very dangerous. Our up-and-coming, young and refreshed generation of Bahamian, filled with hope and optimism and talent and ability, Speaker, we must not speak of failure and doom upon our people. Speaker, I heard even a senior prelate, one of the denominations, speak of our people drowning. Speaker, we're not a drowning people, Mr. Speaker. No. Speaker, our country does face complex challenges and worrying changes. But we cannot throw our hands up into the air and cry and moan and groan and gnash our teeth and hold our heads, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I want to give a news flash to this Parliament for those who might not know. For us in leadership, in particular in this country, in the church and in this Parliament and elsewhere, this defeatist behavior, this spirit of, and I don't know if this is a word, overwhelmedness, is the easiest thing in the world to do. When you face crisis, you could crumble any second. It's easy, Speaker. But what is difficult, and what is also required of us as men and women who have trusteeship of our nation on behalf of generations coming up and those yet unborn, is that we roll up our sleeves and that we put our shoulders to the wheel, that we be of good courage and stand for our people. Speaker, the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, several weeks ago, referred to the book of Joshua. And I looked at this now with the assistance of the member for Yamakroa, who's a minister, in the church and who was able to access this for me, the book of Joshua admonishes us to be strong and courageous. And it further advises, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Speaker, the book of Joshua further admonishes that after 40 years in the wilderness, and we know we have 40 years as a new nation, that God's people should go out and possess all the land. Not some. If you read the Bible, it talks about the rivers, the mountains, not the safe quarters or the familiar turfs, but those areas yet uncharted, and far into the distance, and vast and extensive, and sometimes difficult. Take possession of the land the Lord thy God has given you. That is what we are required to do as a people. We cannot stay in a box and say, oh, we can't enforce the traffic laws, so we can't do too much. We have to view ourselves in a very different way, Mr. Speaker. And the Bible tells you that. Go and possess the land, the extent of the land, the uncharted portions of the land, the difficult terrain of the land. Go and possess it, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, today the coat of arms is displayed in Parliament. I'm the member for Carmichael. Who created that? Who created the coat of arms? Yeah. The Junkanoo Development Association. All of the major groups have collaborated, and they've created the coat of arms, which is displayed outside in Parliament, in the Parliament Square. And Mr. Speaker, as has been pointed out, it stands in front of Queen Victoria, the statue. And it challenges that statue in height and width. And Mr. Speaker, this is symbolic, visionary thing out there, because it's fundamental in its symbolism. The statue of the 19th century British monarch and the symbol of our coat of arms, which represents our new and emerging national identity, Speaker. So, Speaker, in a speech commemorating our national independence, the late Lyndon Oscar Pindling described us as having what he called a beautiful history. And you wonder about that description because when you look at the pain and the denigration and the suffering that we suffered as a people, but his vision looked at the upholding of courage, the unshakable vision, the spiritual anchor, the powerful love of God and country and fellow man. Plenty love that brought us through the fire, Mr. Speaker. We have a beautiful history. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we are not ugly. We are not weak. We are not inept. We are a powerful people with an incredible track record to date. We are a beautiful and gifted people with a beautiful country. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be a Bahamian, and I'm proud to represent the people of Angleton. And Mr. Speaker, today the people of Angleton have challenges. Those challenges in that community relate to issues of employment, housing, conditions of poverty, problems of crime and violence. And the policy of our government must respond to these challenges, Mr. Speaker. And the Angleton Urban Renewal Program is at work in Angleton. It's been there for a year. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we are going to rework and revitalize that program. I'm very pleased the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador has announced that there will be $10 million for housing repairs, and Angleton will get its share of that. I am seeing a renewal in Angleton in terms of assisting people with roof repairs and housing improvements out of these funds. I'm looking forward to environmental regeneration in that community, to new youth programs, to community engendering initiatives, Mr. Speaker. And so, in the face of our challenges, Speaker, we have to stand to the task. We cannot shrink and rub our hands and cry in the corner, Speaker. We must rise to the occasion. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. But you can't, in the face of the toughness, Mr. Speaker, we got to pull our people through to the shining objective. Speaker, the member for Kalani said, we are not good at enforcing. So in other words, he said, I'm saying this is what he probably meant. We can't enforce, not even traffic laws. So I think he's saying we shouldn't try and jump in this big league. But I ask him, Mr. Speaker, we have challenges in our educational system. So should we not aim for a University of the Bahamas? Because we are struggling at some levels, should we not say we want a university for our country? Speaker, we have challenges in our healthcare system. And he alluded to that today. He's saying we can't even run the hospital good, and now you want to bring stem cell research, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, you deal with those issues, but is he saying we cannot advance because we have challenges, Speaker? What kind of rationale is that? What is that a leader is telling a people? Speaker? Speaker, we can't put up barriers and stop signs and no-go zones for our people. Because you cannot tell our young and brilliant Bahamian minds, and there are many, not one or two or three or four or five, there are many. You cannot tell them, as the member for Kalani suggested, that they cannot pursue new horizons of scientific study and pursuit, Speaker. Because we have challenges, and yes, we have challenges. Yes, it does not mean that we must stay in one place or go in a hole, that we can't aspire to greatness. Yes, we have challenges, Mr. Speaker. We should not be admonished by political leaders to sit small when God directs us to take possession of the land that has been given to us. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we must address our challenges in education so that our children attain their full potential during their life's tenure. And yes, we must improve our healthcare system. Yes, we got to do these things too. And our state of health on a national level, especially non-communicable, chronic non-communicable diseases. And yes, we must continue to push the envelope and build new capacity for our country, such that we may maintain a dynamism as a people. We cannot be stagnant and stale and limited. And I don't like to hear that. We're not drowning, we ain't ugly, and we're not inept, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, ultimately, this bill that we're talking about, and I don't have a problem with concerns being expressed, because it is a new frontier in science, and there are risks that people would have, that intelligent, rational people will have concerns about. I don't have a problem with that, Mr. Speaker. But I just want to look at what the bill actually does. First of all, it creates a legislative framework. And the legal framework is a legal framework for research and therapy. So that is what we're looking at, creating a new environment for research in stem cell and therapy with stem cell. And then the bill seeks to establish or ensure that the research and therapy is conducted safely and ethically. Further, the bill seeks, through this facilitative initiative, to foster innovation, to encourage medical cure and regenerative medicine, Speaker. So the bill itself creates a legal framework which seeks to ensure that work is done safely and ethically within guidelines, and that at the same time it fosters innovation and medical cure. The bill also provides for an ethics committee, and that committee is charged with ensuring that best practices are carried out and there is continuous monitoring of compliance with this act and the regulations. And Section 6, Clause 6, prohibits certain procedures, and you would have heard some references to the procedures that have been spoken to. And so it creates a legal framework. It puts in place an ethical body to ensure ethical practices in the carrying out of this. But it also, though, part of its objective is to encourage innovation and to bring cure for the human condition, for devastating diseases. And so, Mr. Speaker, our task now is to continue to build capacity in this field and to create linkages with what is going to become the University of the Bahamas for the furtherance of scientific research in the cure and healing of terrible and devastating diseases, For those of us who are lawyers or business persons, this may have no meaning for us, but for the young Bahamians who are brilliant scientists, and there are many, they understand what capacity, what kind of realm is being created for themselves in actively participating as Bahamians in the furtherance of this research and in the use of this therapy. Mr. Speaker, this is a new frontier and provides for an incredible opportunity for the tapping into the tremendous talent in our country. And it creates intellectual linkages nationally and internationally. And Mr. Speaker, we talked about medical tourism, but I don't use that terminology. For some reason, it doesn't go right with me. I would rather say that we would be creating a center for excellence in medicine in this field, Mr. Speaker, and that when people hear about us, that they will wish to come here to access the excellent medical care that we have developed in this country. But you can call it medical tourism if you wish, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, just before I take my seat, I just wanted to raise the issue that many of us have spoken about, the issue of breast cancer among young women, and in particular the BRCA gene, which affects young women and is a form of cancer that is aggressive and targets young women and oftentimes leads to death. And I'm wondering if the member for North Andrews could tell me, would this help something like this? The BRCA gene, the genetic breast cancer. This might assist. This is a chronic issue in the Bahamas. I don't think there's any person in this parliament who does not know someone, some young woman, who has not died as a result of this. And I want to recognize one who died last week, Tornell Brown. Tornell Brown, I'm told, was in her late 20s, early 30s, articulate, intelligent, hopeful, promising, a mother of one child, and she lost her life after a very courageous and extended battle with breast cancer last week. And so this is a genetic trait that Bahamian women seem to have in large numbers. And if this kind of research can help our young women, you can't help your genetic makeup, but if it can help us resist, move us forward so that we would be able to have a more promising lifespan. And so, Mr. Speaker, while I agree that we must ensure that we have a tight regime that monitors and ensures best practices, I agree with that. And this is critical, and we have to make sure that happens. We cannot be known for a jurisdiction that allows any sort of substandard practices to take place in this delicate area. But, Mr. Speaker, in requiring high standards, if we say we need high standards, that should not be an argument to disqualify Bahamian scientists. Should not be an argument. Should not, Speaker. And we should not be arguing that the limits of our nation should be limited because we can't enforce the traffic laws. I'm very disappointed by that kind of comment, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I support this legislation. I support it because it creates a legal framework. It protects, through its provisions, the monitoring of this activity and ethical standards. It will create new opportunity for young Bahamian scientists, and there are many, and I know them. And this will allow us to begin to build capacity as a new and developing nation in this field. And we're going to build capacity in other areas too, Mr. Speaker. We don't have to stay with the same script that we inherited 30 years ago. And we shouldn't be afraid to push the envelope and to create new horizons for our people, Mr. Speaker. And so for those who have trepidation about us moving forward in an adventurous way, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge them, fear not, because it is in the book of Joshua that we have been admonished to possess the land, not to stay in a little 2x4 in the corner, Mr. Speaker, but to go out and possess the entirety of the land. And I am hoping that at this 40th anniversary, as we begin a new era in our lives as a people, that we will begin to see ourselves in a much more progressive way without limitation as a people who are gifted and talented and who are able to do incredible things, Speaker, that the world will watch and see. And so, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Afternoon, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, members of the Bahamian public. Mr. Speaker, with you all, I beg your indulgence today, sir, to make a brief communication to the House before I do my presentation on stem cell research and development. In order to communicate to the House of Assembly the Commonwealth of Bahamas National Independence Commission's report and July calendar of events so that members and the general public will be duly informed. And I have a formal communication to be laid at the end of it, sir, with your permission.
Very well.
Mr. Speaker, a great thing happened in this same square yesterday where we had one of the great visionaries of the Bahamian independence movement, Dr. Hervis Bain, who was present and was duly honored and exalted for his exalted rank and talents. Reverend Dr. Hervis Bain is one of the rarest of individuals we have in any such country, and it was a great blessing to have him here at the time as we put that great sculpture in juxtaposition to the statue of Queen Victoria, marking several hundred years of progress to a place where we've arrived at. And I just want to congratulate him as we honored him yesterday, being the originator of the coat of arms of this great country. It was a wonderful time as he gave a brief insight into what these symbols meant. Reverend Dr. Bain was brought into the Captain Churchill building 2 years before this event occurred and asked by the late Sir Lyndon Oscar Pindling to develop this particular thing called the coat of arms. Of course, everyone thought as such a young nation we would refer that to one of the guilds of England, but we reposed it in ourselves to trust a Bahamian to come up with this mighty symbol that will stand the test of time. And so this flows right into what we're talking about today, is, you know, you got to have some trust in yourself and in your own people. Dr. Bain gave us a wonderful insight yesterday, sir, as he said that these symbols that he put on the coat of arms are not just birds, fish, a boat, a conch shell, and some leaves, but these symbols, as he pondered them for a 2-year period, he researched this for 2 years of his life before completing pen to paper. And he says each of these symbols is inhabited by a spirit. And he gave us an insight into the 3, which I'd like to share as I present our Independence Commission's report. From his words, that these spirits, one of the flamingo, which most Bahamians, well, a lot of people have never seen up close and personal, really was done not because of its beautiful color, radiant wings, elegant stance, but actually it was done because of the manner in which the flamingos take care of their families, nurture and protect each other. The way the male sits on the nest, it's one of the only birds in the world, and male sits on the nest to guard the young so that the female can go out, stretch her wings, get a rest, and socialize a while, and come back rested. says that these birds actually are in it for the long term. Flamingos seem to have a developmental capacity. They're not in it for the short term. Flamingos stay for the long haul. And that was why he looked at this particular bird. He said the blue marlin, which is an even more mysterious fish. I don't think very many people could say they've landed one or boated one or even come close to catching one. But if you ever encounter one on a line, you will think you caught yourself a Mack truck. These fish spend 99% of their life in very deep water, out in the Atlantic Ocean, by themselves, minding their business, And sometimes they come up to feed for brief moments. That's when most people try to catch them. But if you catch one, you'll find out that they have a fight like nobody else's business you can imagine. And most times, they actually get away. So they're very difficult to capture and almost impossible to beat. And he thought that was something that he saw in the Bahamian spirit and put that as one of the symbols that will endure the test of time. And furthermore, he thought, how would he come up with this motto that would last? And the Reverend Dr. Bain pondered this particular piece for the longest time he could imagine. And the only way he thought we would grow as a country, following the dictates of Almighty God. People also want to remember he is a great artist, but he's also a Baptist preacher. And he came up with the dictates he thought for us to grow. We would only move forward if we looked upward as to where our strength comes from, if we looked ahead as to something where we would get to go, and if we went at it together. And he came up with his motto actually from his meditations that took 2 years. And so today we congratulate the Reverend Dr. Hervis Bain on his great accomplishment. We see outside in Parliament Square an emblem of his vision and his fidelity to us as a nation. And as was said earlier, you know, the people went to these constitutional talks as a colony, and those men in Rosen Square, who are all up today, came back from those talks and saw a country. That is vision, sir. On this occasion, sir, we want to also remember the words of the great R.H. Cooper, and he was the one who actually on July 10, 1973, delivered the message on Clifford Park, the sermon. R.H. Cooper from Hay Street, R.E. Cooper from Hay Street, I think that's Mission Baptist Church. And he said, you know, it's so interesting, but he looked and pondered again at the birth of a new nation. And the Bible tells us of this again in 2 Peter. He made mention that Jesus, even in the midst of the storm, just had to say, peace, be still. And yes, at times the Bahamas feels like we are in the midst of a storm. And it is for us to be still. He made note that Peter was the only disciple who walked on water. 1, because he got out of the boat, but 2, because he believed. And as I relate this to our stem cell scenario, you know, we got to get out the box a little bit as a country. The things that we've relied on may not carry us as far as we'd like to go now, or carry the amount of people we have to take with us, but we have to believe. This is the time now more than ever, to believe in the idea and the place called the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I just wanted to also give, for the record, Mr. Speaker, what the great R.E. Cooper said that day to the heirs and successors and inheritors of God's grace. A nation as newborn babes desire the pure milk of the Word. That's what the member for Anglican was talking about earlier. Be careful of these words we use to inhabit our minds, our thoughts, and our country. In 2 Peter, verse 9, Cooper plainly said that you are a chosen generation. 40 years is a generation. A royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of the darkness and into his marvelous light. Out of the darkness and into his marvelous light. You better believe that. That we may honor our people and love one another as he has loved us. Loved us. And this is how the framers and the people who blessed us before we even knew we were going to become a country started out. I saw Aunt Jane here earlier. That's Jane Fernanda, and I wanted to remind people who may or may not know, she's the niece of the great H.W. Brown from Bethel Baptist on Meeting Street. And long before anyone had any faith in any people from around here of our color, H.W. Brown on Meeting Street was preaching that word. Long before anyone of any pastor in any church in the Bahamas campaigned for this thing called the PLP, H.W. Brown used to go to the banana boat and tell everybody there, you know, this is the way to go. We go in all the way. And I pay tribute to her today. And men like him, we wish to remember these people who got us through to this point. To speak on that note, I wish to lay on the table, sir, this July events calendar and this communication, which says over the next several days we will have a multitude of events stretching from Abaco to Inagua in celebration of the 40th anniversary of independence. As of today, you saw the presentation of the coat of arms, which is outside in Parliament Square. Tomorrow you will see the Independence Rush, which will be the last of the practices on Bay Street. The day after, All Andros, Very Islands Independence Regatta. July 5th in this square, National Pride Day. We invite all Bahamians to wear their national colors. All parliamentarians present here today would have received a package, flags, pins, and shirts. On July 5th also, there's a huge concert, Thomas A. Robinson. Pardon? This Friday. That's this Friday, July 5th. This Friday coming. Today is the 3rd, tomorrow will be the 4th. They also see the urban renewal bands playing over the hill in their various communities. On Saturday, July 6th, Mr. Speaker, which is a very interesting date for us, as 40 years ago, on that same day, His Royal Highness Prince Charles would have arrived in Nassau to hand over the constitutional documents, and on this day, the same day, he would have attended the Independence Ball. And so I'd like to thank my wife, who runs the Pinling Foundation, for her hard work in organizing us in the Independence Legacy Ball. We'll celebrate with this foundation at the Cable Beach Hotel at 7 p.m. Saturday the 6th of July. Saturday the 6th of July, 7 p.m. On Sunday, Beat the Retreat, which will feature the police, prison, and Defense Force bands in one place for an enormous event in Rosen Square at 5 p.m. on Sunday, after which those who can will be going to the Regent Bells in concert celebrating 65 years of gospel music and mission in the Bahamas at Evangelistic Temple. Monday is National Symbols Day. The constitutional documents and mementos will be displayed for the first time in decades in the foyer of the Senate. Cabinet will meet on Monday morning and receive the Constitutional Review Report. As the first time it will be tabled in public. A public presentation will be made in that regard. stamps to commemorate this great event will be put to the public on that occasion, and the public is invited. I have personally never seen the constitutional documents face to face, and so I look forward to being able to see the original documents on Monday morning. On Tuesday, we ask that people come early, come one and all to the 40th anniversary celebrations on Clifford Park, 8 p.m., where you will see the reenactment of 1973. You'll see the service of Thanksgiving by the Christian Council, the Royal Bahamas Police Force Tattoo, after which great fireworks, a cultural presentation, and a midnight youth gala concert put on by Fred Ferguson and co. Don't miss it. The People's Rush is at 3 a.m. Reverend Dr. Hervis Bain will be honored at that, and the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. National Float Parade will follow all around the Bahamas, all the way from the neighborhoods to Clifford Park again, and that evening a formal reception to be held at Government House. Speaker, I thank you for your indulgence. Just for the record, I wish to table this so it may be a part of the annals of the House celebrating 40 years of independence.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the communication be brought up.
On the issue of stem cell research and therapy, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to just say in support of the Minister of Health, the MP for North Andros and the Berry Islands, and his courage in bringing this forward at this time. There is never a wrong time to do the right thing. And I think that Minister Gomez, the member for Berry Islands and North Andros and Berry Islands, has picked actually the right time to do the right thing. And I'll give you just a quick brief as to why. This is the dawn of a new era. And in the past, we really thought about lifespan as how long someone would live. And we all heard these stories about, my granduncle who lived to be 105, and my Aunt Sue who's 96 and living by herself, etc., etc. And that's fine, and oftentimes exceptions can also prove rules. But normally people don't tell you that after a certain age you can deteriorate and you may live to be 100, but you may also spend the last 25 years, debilitated, or for many people in bed, or for many people without memories, or for many people not even being able to recognize their spouse or children or grandchildren or their house, or have any memories at all. So the discussion in the 21st century now switches from lifespan to something called health span. And these are two very different concepts, because health span is the amount of time that you will spend being able to do the things you want to do. You got me? The things you'd want to do. And many of us in here, some young, some middle age, realize that, when maybe just 10 years ago you could have run a 5 mile, go on the beach and run 5 miles, or you could go play basketball in the middle of the sun, or you might be able to run up a flight of stairs or do whatever. You can't do it anymore. And other things come into play as this develops. So stem cells is a complete game changer, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you why. At the turn of the last century, the average lifespan of a Bahamian male was about 40 years old. 40 years old. Just over 100 years ago. 40 years old. Most people were, on average, wrapping up. Okay? That's lifespan. Now people, of course, live a lot longer. Right? Now people live a lot longer. Thank you. Now people, of course, living a lot longer, but have a lot more problems. You got me? A lot more problems. We're seeing more cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, MCIs, Alzheimer's, arthritis, back problems, leg problems, blindness than ever before. And head problems too. So although we're moving into a time span increase, there's a quality of life issue that this speaks to. And Mr. Speaker, I am medically trained. I was one of the lead searchers at Life Extension International. I've spent about 20 years looking at diabetes and nerves, but I don't want to talk about that today. I really want to share with you all a personal story. Two pieces. First part, I left home with the hope of becoming a world-renowned psychiatrist. I never really had any thought of doing what I ended up doing, which is podiatric medicine and surgery. And I got a call one day. I was in London, I was at Guy's Hospital, and my mother got ill. She had diabetes, and they had to take her leg off. I said, well, why? And they couldn't give me a good reason. They said, well, at people this age become diabetic, and sometimes this is just what happens. I didn't accept it. I left medical school, came back to the Bahamas for 2 years. I treated her myself. She lived to the ripe old age of 70-something, never lost a limb, had a ball of a time, and passed away after running around all day at the hairdresser or something, had a heart attack. Happy as a lark. I returned to London, and everyone, you know, was perfect, and not many people understand me in the first place. Hope was there, she'll tell you. And I went into podiatric surgery. So I went from the head. Sea breeze. I went from head all the way down to feet. I was like, geesh. But I did it for a reason. I did it for her. I pledged in treating her, in doing whatever as a labor of love for me, that I would find out everything I could so that other people's mothers would not have to suffer in this way. Right? And I really devoted the second part of my life just to that. I spent 90% of my time treating the poorest people in the world for diabetic foot problems. And I've been around the world doing it. I even had the privilege of getting a call from the member for Bain and Grantstown one day. And his mom needed a surgery. And she didn't want to go to the hospital. And she said, well, Danny, you got to come, you got to sort her out. I get calls from my mom friends now. You got to come, we got to sort this out. And we get it sorted out. When you see someone in need and you can do something for them, there is no greater love. I give you the second reason why this is extremely important. I guess 2002. That's 11 years ago. Monique and I, that's my wife and I, had a little baby born, an angel. The most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. And the nurse said to me that the angels in heaven were jealous. This girl born full head of black hair. Her name was Haley Marguerite. And then she said, the angels are jealous and they're going to want her back in heaven. Man, don't play with me, yeah? But Haley Marguerite passed away 100 days after being born. And I used to walk down the most lonely walk I've seen in my entire life. I worked at PMH then. I'd enter from the western side, the administrative block, and I have to walk all the way down to the NICU at the end of the hallway. A hallway probably about 300 yards long. By myself every morning before I went to work to see my own child in ICU. For several months. And one morning I was doing this walk and I said, now, God, you know, what you could do now, you could take me and save her. You got me? I said to God, I prayed to God, what we can do, we're going to strike a deal here. You could take me and save this little girl. It wasn't to be. And for people in here who have never had this feeling, I sat and watched one of my own children pass away in the arms of my wife. I sat and watched one of my own children pass away in the arms of my wife at only 100 days old. You hear me? It is the most harrowing experience that you could possibly imagine. But this is going somewhere. 14, 15 years later, the same problem that Haley had was cured by stem cell therapy in Italy. Same little girl that the member for North Andros and the Berry Islands spoke about. The young girl, the baby I just told you of, she had tracheomalacia, meaning the trachea, where it is floppy and it doesn't lock at the right time, vocal cords may not work, and your swallowing and breathing don't coincide. That's a beautiful balance that happens there between swallowing and breathing. Just doesn't work. So the breathing is labored, your eating is a problem, it's a mess. It's a congenital deformity of sorts. But the same problem for the same child that I told God, you could take me if you would save her, is cured now by stem cell therapy. I share that with you all because that is what a parent of a child feels like when they have a problem. Anything you could do to save this child, they would do it. And I see what Abraham wanted to do. I mean, you would sacrifice yourself. And I would do it again. But we'd also do anything we could. It isn't just about my mother who's passed on. It ain't just about Haley. So years after I searched out all the children I could find in the Bahamas with deformities, we put $10 million of work into children in the Bahamas with deformities, doing surgeries night and day, weekends, Sunday, anytime we could. I pay homage to the team from Johns Hopkins, Harvard University, to come down here on the weekends with us and operate on Bahamian children that you all would never see because people hide them in their homes. You'll never see these children because people are embarrassed by them and they keep them home. Many are in closets. I used to walk around and find these children, operate on them, and they go outside. You hear me? It's real. That's how I spent most of my time. Not the foolishness that people talk about. That's why I've been spending my time. Stem cells. If people in here old enough to remember, polio. Remember polio? When we were young kids, people come around with a little thing and do a little bloop, 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 bloop. Everyone get it from them out. Do you see people around here limping on one foot with club foot and with this, that, and the other, the back bend? Do you see it anymore? No. You know the millions of people who suffered around the world with polio? Millions of people lived a life of severe, the most severe burden you could carry as a human being is to have an outward mark of disability. But a guy came up with an idea. These dreamers that people keep telling us about. I'm a dreamer, I can tell you that. He came up with an idea. Jonas Salk. Jonas Salk came up with an idea. Listen and learn, eh? Jonas Salk came up with an idea that possibly you could introduce something similar to it and you would vaccinate someone against even ever getting it. You know, Jonas Salk did this. He probably could have been one of the richest men ever in the world. But because Jonas Salk saw so many people with polio, you know, he gave that to the world for free. For free. Again, later in 1928, Banting and Best looked at people with diabetes, gave it out to the world for free. Stem cell research, my colleagues, has the ability to eradicate certain illnesses forever. People around here who have diabetes, people around here who have chronic glaucoma, people around here who have heart disease, coronary failure, who in congestive heart failure, any number of things, kidney failure. Arnold Forbes was there with a man with kidney transplant, thanks to Grace God and his wife.
Mount Moriah.
Mount Moriah. You hear me? This can do that. This is a game changer. Why would we not want to be on the competitive edge in this arena? Of course, people got to understand government is regulator and facilitator. You will see the highest standards of scientific and ethical profiles possible. It is not true that we cannot do this in the Bahamas. We've done great things like this before. You partner with people. It's easy to find. It's easy to do. There will come a time. I've had knee surgery. The member for Marathon, who was a great athlete at this time, he had knee surgery last year. Stem cell is going to get us to the point. I think you had knee surgery, back surgery. Stem cells get you to the point you're going to get an injection. You're not going to go on a table and have this, that, and other, and be at risk of infection, pulmonary embolism, all this stuff. You're going to get an injection, and you're going to grow new cartilage. This is a game changer. But the biggest part for us in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, in fact, not the next, let me tell you something on the economic front. The next billionaire, and I tell you the first billionaire in the Bahamas, is going to be in the area of health and wellness. That same plant, there you go. The first real cash billionaire in the Bahamas is going to be in the area of health and wellness. That same plant that the member for South Abaco showed this morning, that plant has an extract in it called menhaptalose. Menhaptalose, remember that name. That holds the secret to the cure for metabolic disease. Same plant. First billionaire in the Bahamas be in the area of health and wellness. And that could very well come from research and development. And this is something we got to get into. This is the time. This is the place. This is the idea. Don't knock. This is the new era in the Bahamas, 21st century Bahamas. And you know what? It was so beautiful, Mr. Speaker. If you'll indulge me for 1 minute for that, let independence take up half the time. I don't know if I can mention that publicly. But the way 21st century research is going, the way the internet is, the way information is, you can get in on research and development. Research and development is being done all around the world, in many countries, big countries, small countries. This is an industry that is a level playing field that we can participate in. No reason why we should not. And as member for Marco City said earlier, please don't let this be like captive insurance. Because I'm telling you here today, and I want this to be on the record, first billionaire in the Bahamas, real billionaire, be in health and wellness. I think it would be from stem cell research and development. Big I support this bill. I congratulate member for North Actress and Ferry Island. I think it's a visionary approach. It is a game changer, life-changing decision. Wish Haley was here to see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognized the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Speaker. We would like to tell
and come back and continue bill. We're entering into the period when there will be tremendous focus on our 40th anniversary. I think it's an important milestone in our history, and I think the persons will be focusing on the celebration of celebration of the birth of our country and its development, an analysis of how far we have come and where we are, and making plans using the bridge to the future, yes, because the journey continues.
Yes.
And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to propose the suspension of the House to the 17th of July at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until the 17th of July in the year of our Lord at 10 a.m. in the morning. As many are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The business of this House do now suspends until the 17th of July, 2013 at 10 a.m. Happy birthday, Bahamas. And honorable members.
All right.
Well, that ends the debate here on stem cell research and therapy. Dr. Daniel Johnson, the member for Carmichael, and the Minister of Youth, Sports, and Culture, recounting some personal experiences about, one, why he ended up doing the kind of medicine that he did, and why it is so important for us to embrace this opportunity to engage and participate in stem cell research and therapy. Again, July 17th, which means the House will be back after independence as the leader of government business in the House. Dr. Bernard Nottage has said it's important now for all of us, as we, meaning the public and members of Parliament, will most likely want to focus and spend all their time focusing on the 40th anniversary, which is certainly a milestone event in the life of the Bahamas. And so the House has been suspended. It's suspended and will return on July 17th when debate on the stem cell research bill, we expect, will continue. And so on behalf of the entire team here at the Parliamentary Channel, I want to wish you a happy 40th anniversary. The Broadcasting Corporation, which the Parliamentary Channel is a part, will be airing tonight at 9 o'clock, our last edition, installment of Independence Reflections. And so we invite you to watch us tonight. We're going to be speaking with Parade Commander Keith Mason. He was the parade commander for that first independence. We're also going to be speaking with Mr. Charles Fernanda. He was the equerry to Prince Charles and the first Bahamian to hold those independence papers. We're also going to be speaking with Mr. James Roll. He was the chairman of the Arts and Crafts Exhibition Committee. And, of course, we're also speaking with Mr. Franklin Ferguson, noted photographer, just recently released a book, Through the Eye, historical book. He was one of the official photographers for that independence period and took a lot of those photos. And so, again, that is it for us here at the Parliamentary Channel. We'll be back with you on July 17th to continue debate on this stem cell research and whatever else the government decides it wants to bring at that time. So, on behalf of the team again, I'm Anthony Dubois. Happy 40th Independence.